Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Global Business Schools Conference 2021. It's great to see so many people connected. So just to introduce myself, I am Adam from Docsity. I'm an International Partnership and Marketing Manager. And Andrea, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yes, absolutely. My name is Andrea, and I am the Commercial Director here at Docsity. Both Adam and I are based in Turin. So I'll give you maybe a very brief introduction to about Docsity, since we are the one who organized the conference, so you might be wondering who we are. For those who don't know us, we are an international student community, the largest student community in the world. We were founded back in 2011 here in Turin, where we're based, and we help students on two fronts. We guide them through their studies, and we help them in finding future degrees. Our community is based in over 70 different countries, and it adds up to over 10 million users today. And I would say, in a way, thanks to the current situation, we've seen a very large increase in users joining our community, because a lot of the in-person things are not happening or have not happened over the past year. So we've seen a very large growth in terms of users joining us looking for future degrees. So I'll stop there and I'll pass it back to you, Adam.
Yeah, so folks, the theme for today's event is the future of business education. Obviously, every industry in the world is going through a lot of change, and not left out is business schools and faculties. So the agenda today is very simple. We're going to have a short 90-minute event with lots of speakers, lots of content. We'll have opening remarks, first of all, from Dan LeClair. He's the CEO of the Global Business School Network. Then we will hear from Andrew, who is co-founder of CarringtonCrisp. Andrew is also an EFMD research partner. And then we'll have rapid fire talks from Francesco of ESCP Business School Turin campus. Andrea and I are actually based in Turin in Italy as well. And then we're going to hear from Rachel from INSEAD Business School. Then we'll hear from Dillon, who is from the Gabelli School of Business of Fordham University. And then we'll hear from Gerard, who is the Associate Dean of Hong Kong Baptist University School of Business. And once we have that done, we'll hear from George T.C. Post, who's going to give a keynote speech about global higher education. He is a global higher education strategy and digitalization expert. And then we'll have a roundtable discussion with all the previous speakers that you just saw, and then we'll have an audience Q&A. So we're going to open up the chat, and you folks can write questions to the speakers if you wish. We will begin with Dan from the Global Business School Network. Thanks, Dan.
Great. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion throughout, and especially at the end. I'm with the Global Business School Network. It's a network of about 120 leading business schools in 50 or so countries, focused on, and that includes INSEAD. Where's Rachel? Focused on improving leadership, management, entrepreneurship in and for the developing world. Now, I'm told I have about 4 minutes to explain the universe as it relates to business education in the future. So I'm going to move quickly. And of course, the starting point, it's no secret, is technology. So I'm going to start there, and I'm going to start on the demand side. Obviously, technology is the biggest driver on the demand side. Think automation, think about the skills and how they're changing, how the jobs of the future are not even known today, that sort of thing. But it's not just the jobs and the skills, it's the context, right? Who are the winners and the losers, the context in terms of how we think about inclusion and a variety of other things related to this. But I'm going to focus on the other side, on the supply side. And the neat part is technology is the biggest driver on the supply side as well. It's the same stuff, right? It's internet, it's virtual reality, augmented reality, it's big data, it's automation. It's all of these things that we talk about when we think about technology. But the way I talk about it on the supply side is a little bit different. I call these big enablers, right? So these things that I just mentioned, these are the enablers of the future of business education. And enablers of what? I usually focus on 4 things. One, and most obviously, is access. So think emerging economies, think lifelong learning and the 100-year career, that sort of thing, where we're learning throughout a lifetime because business and organizations. They're more dynamic than ever. The access part, I think, gets a lot of attention in business education's future. And I'm going to come back to that to sort of sum it all up in a minute. But I actually get more excitement out of the next three. And I'll just rattle them off quickly. Number one, the future of business education is more personal, more personalized. So personalization. Secondly, it's more experiential. And thirdly, it's more social. And technology is a big enabler of all three of those things. And you've seen that with COVID, right? You've seen technology come together to support these things and to pull the future forward in a lot of ways. With personalization, think adaptive, think big data, think increasing role for assessment and to help learners understand where they are in the process. For experiential, obviously you think project management, but also think virtual reality and augmented reality. With social, it's about who we connect with. And the cool part is that this is where I think business schools can shine, is in these three dimensions and distinguishing themselves. Obviously, the access part has two sides of the coin, right? The market's gonna explode, it's continuing to explode, but at the same time, there are more providers and each learner will learn from more than one. Right, so it's really important to find your niche, to understand where your programs fit vis-a-vis others. And I think these last two, personalization, last three, experiential and social, fit in. I'm gonna stop there. I hope I didn't exceed my 4 minutes. I suspect I did, but I know Andrew very well, and he'll add on, build on the kinds of things that I said.
Dan, thank you very much. You were within time, which is perfect. Never happens. So congratulations. Andrew, we'll hear from you now. Looking forward to it.
Thanks very much, Andrea. Delighted to join you all from CarringtonCrisp. I'm going to draw on a specific study we did with EFMD last year. It's called See the Future, but also studies we've done in the last 12 months with LinkedIn and the Executive MBA Council. We've been studying the business school marketplace for 18 years now. I have worked with over 180 schools in 35 countries in that time. So we've got a good insight, I hope. 6 things I want to talk about. I'm going to connect Henry Ford to Mao Zedong, so it's going to be quite an adventure, hopefully. First off, what's driving the change? Changes in society, diversity, equality, inclusion, big social movements. You can't study business in isolation, and so business schools of the future will be much more connected to wider society. They'll collaborate across institutions, and they'll collaborate with other institutions, with private sector organizations. They'll be about teaching students, not necessarily accounting and marketing and finance, they'll all be there, but more importantly, teaching students how to learn and how to unlearn, to think about the future without thinking about the past too much. Of course, as Dan said, much of this will be around technology. Technology will be everywhere. There'll be a digital thread that runs through many programs. It'll be there before to help bring students up to speed. It'll be there during to extend the breadth of the program. And it'll be there afterwards to maintain momentum from a program, to keep people learning. And as Dan said, it'll be there to drive student success, to understand how they're learning and how they can learn better. And the audiences will be so different from today. We'll be educating students aged 16 to 60 and beyond. Many in our study last year, See the Future, said they expected to work into their 70s. Who can imagine, just think back 50 years, who can imagine how the world will be in 50 years and the skills that will be required to be successful in 50 years' time? So that learning and unlearning constantly will become so important. And it won't just be about degrees. Degrees, yes, but micro-credentials, digital badges, stackable courses, all sorts of variety. And that's where Henry Ford said, you can have any color so long as it's black. Mao Zedong said, let 100 flowers bloom. And today, that's the approach that business education has to take, to have diversity, to have flexibility, the way people learn, what they learn, when they learn, where they learn, how they learn. All of these things will evolve and change over time. And so what this means for business schools is that brand rather than geography will really be to the fore. Having that strong identity, knowing what you're about, as Dan said, having things that fit and where they fit with others, and building learning communities. So a degree is not just for 3 or 4 years. a degree is for life. But that degree will change and evolve and add new components as you go through your life. And what this probably means for the business schools in the future is they'll not necessarily be big anymore. Big won't be the ideal. Agile and quick. They won't necessarily be historic. They'll be entrepreneurial. They won't necessarily be standardized. They'll be about value and flexibility. And let me sum it up for you with a quote from the ad agency Saatchi & Saatchi. They said a few years ago, if you only give people what they already want, someone else will give them what they never dreamed possible. And that's the wake-up call for business education. What have you never dreamed of? Because that's what you need to deliver for the future.
Now we're going to hear the rapid fire talks about the theme, the future of business education. And our first speaker will be Francesco from ESCP Business School in Turin.
Hi, everybody. I will be a little bit more down to earth because I totally agree with the disruption we have had. But let me remind that this conference is happening exactly in a period where lots of students are back to school. You know, higher education was probably the most disrupted industry by COVID. Although we found our own way of continuity, but disruption was massive. Let me just tell you what happened here in Italy. You know, we moved online at the end of February 2020. Then we briefly opened, you know, for September, October, then to close again. And eventually we were back, you know, teaching in on site. You know, we started a few weeks ago, more or less. Of course, with reduced capacity of classroom and all the things, you know. So this is a huge disruption at the expenses of, let me say, really the weakest part of the society, and the one where we put all our dreams and hopes for the futures. Okay, so you know, I was listening to Dan, you know, talking about personalization, experiential learning, and social. Where was the social in the last, you know, year and more? You know, Andrew was talking about connection and customization, and then he talked about community. You know, so the social, the community part, even if it's online, needs to be brought back into the equation, which for more than 1 year was outside of the equation. And I want to remind that whatever we talk now is first priority for any government and us, because we are in leadership position, is to bring back to normal, you know, most of the students, they need to be back. Families needs to be back to their normal routine, so that the economy can go back, okay? And experiential learning has to be at the heart of what we do as in business education, because you learn business only from your peers. You learn more from your peers and working in group than what you learn from your professor and so forth. So I really think that whatever we are going to be talking this evening, we need to make it actionable tomorrow. And then my last, because we need to bring the kids back, okay, at school more than in virtual Zoom conferences. And then last but not least, let me give you my hope. The share of investments, okay, allocated for the younger generations and even to education in any recovery funds is ridiculous. If you look at the initial draft of the Italian rollout of the Next Generation EU, it was 1%. 1% of the Next Generation EU in Italy will be spent on young people. Think about what will be spent on university and business school, 0. Now there is a movement that asks for 10%. So I think we need to join the young generation to ask for more investments on young people, which will be also investments in education, because there is an opportunity here to reform the whole education industry to go after all the very visionary things that Andrew and Dan were mentioning, but we need funds. 1% is not enough. We need to ask for more, 10% at least, and we need to be next to our kids. I call kids, the students. I'm sorry about that, but next to the students and ask for that, because it is important to go back to normal and to have a new normal, okay, for the future, where community values and social value are going to be even more developed than what we experienced before the COVID. This is my wish, and this is my rapid fire talk.
Yeah, Francesco, grazie mille. Very good speech. Appreciate it. So now we will hear from Rachel from INSEAD Business School.
Hi, everyone. Very pleased to be here today. Already very interesting points made by the other speakers. So I thought I would give a little bit of background on kind of the journey that we've been through and where we see things going in the future. So INSEAD was hit very, very hard by the pandemic because we had high global mobility built into all of our programs. We are a multi-campus school, so we send people around the world, people traveling from all over the world. So we were hit very hard, and we actually did not have much online. We had executive education courses, shorter courses online, but in our degree programs, we maybe did have less hybrid approach than other institutions. So very quick pivot to online. We were very unsure of the success we could have with that, and the results have been definitely beyond our expectations in terms of what we've managed to achieve in terms of people learning and interacting between students, and also even on the club front, all of the things that are part of the social side. INSEAD has a huge social side to it. So this we did have to pivot online, and we had some really interesting results. And I think now we're in a space like other institutions looking at what does the future hold? Where is the balance from kind of 100% online to bringing things back, as Francesco said, to a new normal, but a new normal where we do actually have more physical interaction. So we've been thinking a lot about expanding the model, including vertical and horizontal learning. And one of the things that we've seen is when you have kind of huge numbers in a lecture hall, that learning actually can take place pretty well online, as long as you can complement it with smaller groups and interactions with peers that can live alongside that, where people can have the chance to express their ideas and learn together and learn from each other. So this is definitely something that we're trying out at the moment, with having kind of reduced numbers in the classroom at the same time. And we're finding that that's giving already some balance to the students. And also we're looking at this as an opportunity. We've definitely accelerated the digitalization. We've made it possible now for people to actually have this dual experience, successfully be able to ask their questions if they're on Zoom, to be heard if they're in the amphi by someone at the other side of the world on Zoom. So these are things that are definitely pushing the acceleration and that we're testing out. We're also looking a lot at VR, and we feel that this is something that's going to be really positive, and we're using it not just in the classroom, but also with career development. So we see there's a lot of opportunities with VR for people to get glimpses into also career opportunities through this, and also to have access to things that we cannot get to campus. So I think that we see it as looking for I suppose the opportunities that digital can provide to give our students an expanded experience, rather than kind of replacing the social interactions. So we really see that the vibrant campus, we're all missing it. INSEAD staff are missing it as well. So this is something that we're really looking forward to get back to. And we feel that the balance of having this spontaneous social environment is essential for learning. And we also really feel that lifelong learning is going to be a massive part of the strategy for the future, and thinking about a degree as being the base for education, but then thinking how do we constantly enhance and revisit and allow people to upskill and learn new things as they move through their entire career. So this is how we think things are looking.
Rachel, thank you very much. And we're still on time, which is a miracle. It never happens. Next up, we have Dillon from the Gabelli School of Business in Fordham University.
Thank you, Adam. So that means if we're not on time after me, I'm the cause of the problem. So I will try to keep my my intro to 2 minutes. Hello, everyone. My name is Dillon Mosenthal. As Adam said, I serve as the Associate Director of MBA Admissions at Gabelli in New York City, as you can see from my virtual background. And my colleagues all had sound points, and I had similar ones, and I'll take a similar approach as Rachel as far as talking about how the pandemic affected the Gabelli School of Business. And really, as Rachel said, it was that sudden shift to virtual that ended up unearthing a lot of our students and a lot of our faculty members, at least initially. But I do think one of the benefits that we saw with this sudden transition to a virtual environment is that the pandemic really served as a catalyst for what was the inevitable. We had been pushing for a long time our faculty members to start offering some sections online. We did believe that some form of a hybrid course delivery would be the future. But pre-pandemic, a lot of our faculty members were resistant to putting their content online. And it took a pandemic to really accelerate that process. And I think that's one of the silver linings with having such a drastic situation where faculty were really faced with a situation where they had no choice but to adapt, but to innovate. And I think just that process of innovation will carry over into the future of business education. I think business schools are going to be better at thinking on their feet, adopting technology quickly, as we did, and as I'm sure a lot of business schools in the world did. You know, before the pandemic, Zoom, not everyone had a Zoom account. Now, Zoom is the primary way in which we communicate. I think other platforms, Microsoft Teams, Slack, direct messaging platforms, those are now becoming commonplace at business schools. So while I don't think that solely virtual engagement will be the future of business education, like my colleague said, I think those in-person interactions are vitally important. I do think that this flexibility and what I call hybridization will be a positive thing for business schools going forward.
Thank you very much, Dillon. Now we will go over to Hong Kong Baptist University School of Business to hear from Gerard Prendergast.
Thank you, Adam. I share my screen. So I want to thank the previous speakers. In fact, everything has already been talked about, and that's the problem with being number 5 or 6, is that you're recovering covered material. The future of business education. Well, there's no time for small talk, so let me get into this. So to prepare graduates to have meaningful professional, societal, and personal lives. But this touches on what the previous speakers said about we've got to look beyond just business itself and the broader impact that business schools are having on society. In my university, we look at whole person education, and we think that our responsibility in the business school goes well beyond business. So looking at the future of how we see the future of business education. Again, most of these points have already been made, but the first one that I see at the school level is the acceleration of entrepreneurial education. And in fact, my university was already going down the entrepreneurial path before COVID emerged, but now I think there is even more responsibility on business schools to push entrepreneurial education. We talk about social responsibility. One of the responsibilities of business, of course, is to create jobs. And there's a big need for job creation right now. How will the mix of face-to-face and online modes settle? That was just discussed by Rachel about what kind of mix we're going to see going forward. And it's not just about online classes, it's about online assessment. And I think there is something of an assessment crisis in universities at the moment. It's about online assessment and online interaction. Rachel touched on that as well. And the question is, how will the dust settle between the online and offline modes? I think also there will be this hybridization. In my university, we switched to online mode only when the virus first hit. Then students said they want to have the chance to go to the classroom. So we offered online hybrid mode to students, but then the students aren't turning up to the classroom, even though they asked for the classroom. So I think they've adapted to online mode to an extent. I have heard of some universities that are abandoning large lecture theatres altogether. So there may be a downsizing. Maybe, as Rachel said, those large classes can be put online, augmented with some suitable small. And having a positive impact on society. So schools, research, curriculum and service must have a positive impact on society. And that, of course, aligns with the most recent AACSB standards about societal impact. At the individual graduate level, we often talk about this balance between skills and knowledge. I think we need to swing much more into the skills side rather than the knowledge side. The problem with knowledge, of course, is that it becomes easily redundant, whereas skills we see as being more transferable and more enduring. So skills such as creativity, open-mindedness, adaptability, global mindset, of course. And to achieve those skills, one of the keys that we see is diversity in the student body. It is through diversity that you can learn more creativity, more open-mindedness, and more adaptability, and be more accepting of others. So diversity is a big thing for us in our school. Knowledge, of course, is fairly obvious. Data analytics, intelligence, content creation, cloud computing, and values, we think, are very important. In our school, we have a theme of corporate sustainability. And we emphasize in our curriculum and in our research the importance of a sense of ethics and sustainability. I think we need to change the discourse somewhat from competition to compassion. I met a few years ago in Bhutan. Bhutan has a Minister of Happiness, would you believe, in Bhutan, a Minister of Happiness. And he said that business schools need to think more about compassion rather than just the competition dimension. So I guess compassion ties in with that social impact, social responsibility aspect. You're probably familiar with the book written by Robert Fulghum. He wrote a book called Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And I think we need to remind our students about those important values that we learned in kindergarten. For example, don't hurt people. Don't take stuff which is not yours. Don't tell lies. Clean up your own mess and wash your hands before you eat. That's it. Reinforcing what's already been said. Thank you.
Jared, thank you very much. Love those quotes that you mentioned. So next up now, we have our keynote speech from George T. Sipos. And George is going to talk about recruiting international students for business schools.
Yes, thank you, Adam. And what a pleasure to come after all these wonderful, inspiring speakers who pretty much said everything I wanted to say, except for the recruitment part. I couldn't agree more. It all ties in with Andrew and Dan and Francesco and Rachel and Dillon and Jared's conversation. It is good to see that, at least from a business school perspective, we're already there. We're thinking proactively about these things, and rather than just thinking, okay, we need to not do anything about what's happened over the past year and a half, and it continues in 2021. We just need to go back to what it was. You know, it feels like we're going to be missing an opportunity if we do that, because as Dillon just mentioned, you know, there's been a lot of conservative attitude towards integrating better customization of education, better digitalization of education, hybridization, and so on. So I will try to share my screen right now. So if you can see me now. I'm not going to go into a presentation mode to make it a bit easier. But I will talk about the digitalization and hybridization for your international student recruitment portfolio. And just a brief note about me. This is what I've done over the years. Believe it or not, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a startup person. But in the same time, I'm actually a Japan specialist. I teach Japanese language, literature, and culture. And Japan, in many ways, helped me understand a number of things, especially the time spent in corporate Japan at the headquarters in Toyota Motor Corporation, as well as building companies all over the world. And this is always the quote I like to start. It's a 10-year-old quote, believe it or not, but it's from Clayton Christensen, right from HBS, from the Harvard Business School, and it ties in with Dillon's thoughts earlier. Right, change is inevitable. It will happen for universities, business schools, wherever we are. When it will happen, how it will happen, what it will bring it about, and are we able, as people from the universities? I spent 15 of the past 25 years in universities in Japan, the United States, and Romania, thinking about what it means to push university education forward. So it looks like internal change is not necessarily the way things are happening, and it does take a pandemic sometimes for actually to consider change. And it is unfortunate, as Professor Christensen said back then in 2011, just at the advent of the MOOC, right? Remember the Stanford MOOC started in 2011. It all tied in with the innovative university back then, and we see other business professors today. I mean, obviously. Scott Galloway has been all over. He's been the media dear over the last year, and so saying all kinds of things and being in a way his anger is justified. In other ways, he's doing things a little bit overboard. But the point is there. What he's saying is like there will be always a resistance. There will always be pushback, and that's normal. You know, we are not ready to change systems. Systems are in place because they reproduce themselves. They design a way in which they want to perpetuate themselves. That is the nature of systems for anybody who looks at systems theory, right? Why change? I don't think I need to repeat many of the things that we heard earlier from colleagues from all over the world. I think that a key here, though, that we need to remember is that we need to align ourselves with societal, social needs. We need to align ourselves with the workforce needs. I have friends in MBA programs all over the world, and the more you talk with them, especially over the past 12, 14 months, the more you hear the MBA doesn't deliver the value. What do we do with that? Our students come out, and even if they come out from Booth School or from Fuqua or from major business schools at Duke, Chicago, and Harvard, they sometimes don't get what they want. So there is a discrepancy, there is a disconnect there between what the MBA used to do and what it does now. It ends up being a brand, it ends up being a networking opportunity, but networking is not sufficient anymore. It used to be before 2008, it's not anymore. It doesn't work the same way. So now we have this gap of 13 years between 2008 and the crash and 2021 with the pandemic on top of it, that actually shows us that the workforce and the degrees, not just the MBA, but undergrad degrees in business and economics as well, are disconnected, are ruptured from the workforce in a very significant way. And when you come in and you hear Mark Cuban 7 years ago, in 2013, 2014, say, I don't want to hire MBAs. I don't want to hire bachelors. I will just bring somebody from a high school degree and train them for a year. You know, for somebody coming from a Japanese corporation with where that is the norm. It doesn't matter if you come from Tokyo University or if you come from whatever top university of business in Japan, they take you as if you don't know anything. And they put you in through a cycle of training for 1 year. And I guess that this is what corporations in the United States and worldwide now, global corporations especially, are aiming. How do we reconnect that? And of course, again, colleagues before me spoke about the silver lining and what COVID-19 actually did provide for us. And this is that we're seeing, while we push the online education, at the same time, we also understood what is wrong with that. There are some problems with online education. I mean, we had a lot of universities that offered undergrad degrees fully online even before the pandemic. They didn't work well. I think Francesco is absolutely right. What's missing there? Can we learn Zoom constantly? No, because Zoom, this is not a learning tool. This is not the space where we want to actually do education. This is a conference tool. We work in an environment that's flat. It doesn't create any sort of human touch. Can we overcome that lack? Yes, when we develop the tools that we actually are able to, that allow more social interaction in a different way. And I think Andrew and Dan talked about VR and AR, and that's the type of space that I think university needs to go into. And while not eliminating completely the social element, in the same time also bring together the positive and the negative, and what's able to what hybrid learning environment is able to provide for our students. Let's not forget that, especially for the United States as well as for the UK, one of the major issues that we have at this point with this type of structure that we have in higher education is the cost. And the cost is prohibitive. And if we are looking at the cost, especially in terms of attracting and bringing more global South students into business education, as well as in university education in general, we will have to find ways in which we meet them halfway. Because if we expect them to go to boot school, and I keep talking about the boot school because that's where I started my apprenticeship in higher education at University of Chicago Booth School, working with categories of students that were not able to either pay for the degree or get into the degree. So we were finding ways in which they could take courses separately, you know, in a system that was called Graduate Student at Large. That was the first program that I managed back many years ago when I started my career in higher education administration. So we have to look at the limitations that we're imposing through the cost. And maybe from a business perspective, we can say it doesn't matter what the cost is, but it does, because we're losing talent in the process. If somebody from the global South has the talent and has the drive to go into a school, but we only open the school to somebody who has the money, I don't want to, that's a completely different conversation that I don't think we should start here, but everybody knows what the impact is. What is the situation over the past, like I said, 12, 18 months? You know, first we saw the drop, right? 2019, especially in the US, major MBA schools, enrollment dropped terribly, right? And I'm focusing now on the student enrollment, student recruitment situation. 14.6% at Duke, Yale School of Management, 15%, Dartmouth, 22.5%. And this is from data from the GMAC, right, from the Graduate Management Admissions Council, and reposted in Forbes in August 2019. This is what Dean Ainlay said from the Rochester Simon School. The MBA market is in dire straits right now. This is 2019, right? Just as we had started the pandemic. So everybody was afraid to most deans of business schools at the time, flat was the new norm, right? Flat was the new up, as we see. And it was the same Andrew Ainlay who would say back then, we're going to see the drop. We're going to see MBA schools close. 1 year later, in the pandemic, what happens? September 2020, same Forbes posts, huge numbers up. Wharton School, Columbia Business School, they all look at 50% and over applications and enrollment. Same for schools in Europe and Asia. The numbers are going up, and they've been going up. What is the key here? We have to wonder, what is that created all this? Fortune just last month was posting and some more data from the GMAC saying 70% of the US business schools reported enrollment increases. 70%. 1 year prior to that, we were talking about 15% of the schools closing their doors, declaring bankruptcy. That did not happen, right? So this is where the pandemic actually played into the growth of the MBA model. And in the past month, I think I wrote several pieces for different MBA publications around the world about the value of the MBA. Is the value going up? Is it going down? Where is it? Because the pandemic certainly has changed that perspective. Is it all, however, about the pandemic, or is it also about the digital recruitment? This is something that I don't think can be answered yet. My personal opinion is that, of course, the market, that people who would have never considered an MBA degree during a stable economic situation, especially in the United States, Canada, and the UK, are now in the pandemic thinking this is a good time to prepare for the post-pandemic reality, right? Because the economy has slowed down, because in some cases the jobs are not as stable as they were. And this is always a factor, right? People choose graduate education, business education at times when the economy is not stable, their salaries are not as high, and they're thinking, okay, now is a good opportunity for me to add that degree that I maybe have been putting off for some time now. Can these numbers be sustained in the post-pandemic world? That's a different story. And I think that this is going to matter more over the next couple of years, so the next recruitment cycle, when we look at the next 3 years, 2-3 years, when we look at the methods that business schools will start implementing in terms of recruitment. So what does that mean? It means that as we integrate into a digital university, and in my opinion, the digital university is just a temporary stage. This is not going to be the new reality. The digital university will be the intermediary stage between what we have now and a virtual education university that we're going to move in probably by 2040, 2050. I think we're moving into a more integrated virtual reality where we see AR and VR as part of our. I mean, look at the new tools that are developed out there just for creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship courses. I mean, there are companies that are developing courses that, I mean, platforms where you can actually interact with the students for a business class, for marketing, for a PR class, even for micro and macroeconomics, in a space that allows for gamification, that allows for interaction virtually, that allows for a hands-on practice in a digital reality with companies, right? So you bring in the exercises that you would normally bring in with a company in your classroom. Now you bring them in the virtual space, which allows for a different type of interaction. So this is the model that I've been proposing, and I'm proposing to universities worldwide. You know, comprehensive digitalization that's become an imperative for now, going through the student, from the student perspective, because of course the student is our focus. We're looking at marketing and website, social media. We're looking at recruitment and admissions done digitally, student management and support to grading, graduation, career counseling, learning management courses. Of course, I talked just earlier about learning management systems, experiential learning management, science lab, business courses and practica and so on, library, international education, even where do we go with study abroad? You know, how can we digitize study abroad? I mean, study abroad is so dependent on the 5 senses. It's a very tactile, olfactive, and so on experience. You can't replace that, right? What can we do within that environment? Where do we put COIL, the Collaborative Online International Learning? A lot of the business schools are implementing more and more COIL courses. Do they work? Do they bring that international perspective in terms of how business is done practically? We're talking hands-on, right? Alumni management, fundraising, and so on can all move digital. Not everything, but all these services could move into a digital realm. What does that mean for digital student recruitment in a business school environment? We're looking at websites, right? We're looking at what is the power of your website. I mean, we all know now, anybody with any background in marketing and digital marketing knows that the website is your first tool. And it's in most cases for universities worldwide, is the gateway into the services and curriculum that university offers. And it is also its worst enemy, because most of our websites are pretty lousy. We're not really attracting students. We're not keeping students in there. We're not helping them understand who we are. We present them a flat thing that kind of scrolls up and down, that has no interactive elements, and so on and so forth. Where do we put our chatbots? How many universities from the colleagues who are here today do use chatbots on their entry page, on the business school page, on the university entry page? Very few. Chatbots are still primitive, but they play a role in that interaction that will help the student get as much information as possible from your university. Virtual campus tours. More and more universities are using that. They're more and more praised. They become more and more of a tool that's relevant. And we see just that Fortune article that I mentioned talks a lot. And you know, there's a lot in. That's the link there. I don't know if you can see it really. Under their education business articles, just April 22nd, 2021. 6 MBA admissions trends during the pandemic. Very interesting article, very interesting. I highly recommend it. And it talks about many of these tools that I have in my presentation here, including the virtual campus tour, and how important it is to have it regardless whether there is a pandemic or not, right? How present are you on online portal? Many MBA schools have online portal presence in order to generate leads. Is your university there, you know? How present are you on student peer study communities, such as our host of today, Docsity? We'll talk about them in a little bit. What's your social media content? Who does that? Do you have a strategist who works with your social media and generates that content? Who writes that? Are you on TikTok? You know, And you'd say, well, how am I going to talk about my university on TikTok? Well, there are ways, because you can still do the dances that they do on TikTok and then add the element that is about your university, because that's where the 16, 17-year-old are looking. This is where the height of Gen Z has come with a completely different understanding of where they get their information, right? Digital fairs and webinars, you know about them. The CRM, of course, we all know them about in business schools. Customized communications strategies, and so on. So some examples here. I'm not going to go to these. These are some European and American universities with their website. You see there Brown, you see Johns Hopkins, you see University of Ghent. Highly recommended websites as models for how to be interactive with your students, how to attract them and force them to stay there for more than those 7 seconds, proverbial 7 seconds that we all know about, right? That's their attention span today. That's all they do. They don't stay more than 7 seconds if you don't capture their attention. I think these are websites that are a good model of how you can do that. There's a lot of video interaction, and that video interaction is not the old-fashioned, 10 years ago, video takes forever to load and lower speed internet providers are not going to be able to be carried out. No, we're talking about true light platform, light interaction websites that play videos, that drag you in, that make you click on their call of actions, and so on. The CRMs, we all know CRMs, but in some universities, there's still a major deterrent in actually keeping good track of your leads, and keeping good track of a communication strategy that sometimes just falls through the cracks. It takes a lot of times to connect with the student. You have to be on top of things. You can't just let that go. And some universities in the United States especially, but also in Asia and Europe, are behind. Of course, CRM, HubSpot, Salesforce cost a lot of money. It's very expensive to do, but it's a good investment. And everywhere I went as a director of strategy for international and enrollment management strategy professional, I pushed for good, flexible, adaptable, agile CRM platforms. This is where there are some companies here, some examples of virtual tours. Virtual tour, Campus 360, EAB, Brazen. These are just examples of companies that provide virtual tours. Of course, you can use Google, but Google is not going to give you the amount of detail that these companies can give you. Look at how a company integrates AI into the virtual tour. So you have a virtual tour, you move through, so from a first-person perspective, right? So you move through the campus, but you also have an AI that gives you information, kind of like a museum, if you want, like in a guided tour museum. This is now what you can do to see dorms, to see libraries, to see labs, and so on and so forth. This is a phenomenal tool in the recruitment portfolio of anyone who is in admissions, international or domestic or wherever you are located. So I highly recommend it. There's some examples of universities that have already done it. George Washington, obviously, New Jersey Institute of Technology, you see there the links. There are others around the world that have adopted that. Not so much in Europe and Asia, from what I'm able to see. Actually, I haven't seen any virtual tour in Asia. I scan university websites constantly. I didn't see anything in Asia. Not much in Europe. United States and Canada seem to be there, slowly but surely, right? What else? The platforms that I talked about. Docsity is one of our hosts today, right? Student community engagement. This is a way in which you engage students from an indirect perspective, right? You don't talk to students directly. You don't put yourself necessarily on the platform. You have their student community at your disposal to promote your services to students who are there, just interacting in a peer environment. In Toyota, we did this type of marketing that we called veiled marketing. So we would have groups. I worked with like 150 universities during that time in Toyota, in which we were not promoting any sort of Toyota products at that time. We were actually working in corporate value and corporate philosophy. But what we were doing there, we were brainstorming with universities, bringing them, making them aware of the products, and asking them to come and help us, This is the type of indirect marketing or veiled marketing that I think you can do through companies like Docsity and their platform. Finally, the chatbots, these are last fall chatbots. They're still very primitive, I'm sorry to say, and they're learning. I mean, you can tell if you feed in enough into a chatbot, because it's an AI that's still learning how to deal with things, then you can teach them slowly but surely. But adding a chatbot dialogue window on your site, first and foremost, will capture that lead. And you have a qualified lead there, because if that lead has gone to your website, to a school of business, that person is interested in you. You don't want to lose that lead. But if your website is not working and you don't have any way to capture in that lead, and you just put like a big long list of things, what's your name? What are you interested in studying? Whatever, you're just going to lose them. Because they're not going to sit there and input all that information in there. We see last summer, the New York Times, the chatbots have become like a big deal. I think the examples here are, Saginaw Valley State University. I think the other one is Georgia Tech. I can't remember right now where I found that one, but I think it's Georgia Tech, the one with the blue on the left. So in your recruitment portfolio, these are tools now that are available. Some cost more money than others. Some don't cost much. You can just do them, integrate them, put them together to build your portfolio. I don't want to go much longer than this. If there are any questions, I think that there will be a Q&A session. I don't think we're not doing questions now, right, Adam? No. So I guess not questions now. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or otherwise to continue this conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you to the colleagues at Docsity for this.
Okay, George, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. So folks, now we are going to go into our roundtable discussion. And I'm going to begin with question one, which is, how has business education been impacted by the pandemic? Rachel, perhaps you can answer this first.
Yeah, happy to speak on that. I think we touched a lot on kind of digital acceleration. I think this has probably been the main impact on a kind of school-wide level for I think all of the institutions across the world. I think that's what I've been hearing for the past year. I think looking at a more kind of maybe marketing and recruitment perspective, there's also been a little bit of a shake-up in the way in which we approach field marketing versus digital marketing, and what we actually see as being, I suppose, what we did in the past, which were face-to-face, and how we think about kind of bringing those elements for some of them online, and maybe using data a lot more than we have done in the past. So I think data analytics have become more important, and just analyzing generally where people are coming from, where the touch points are, and looking at the customer journey. So I think for us, we've really done a lot of work, and I think that understanding our customers better as they come into the pipeline and trying to see what support we can provide on the marketing and recruitment side to give them the right insights into the business school, and have that come alive without people being able to meet people from our team, maybe meet less alumni than they had done in past cycles, and not being able to necessarily visit the campuses. So that's definitely been something that we've had to think a lot about, and really think how we can give those customers a great experience before they even join, because that's often a year-long journey before people actually even integrate business school.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. And I'll bring that same question on to Francesco. How has business education been impacted by the pandemic?
Yes, of course, I could repeat a lot of the things that have been said so far, but I think that one of the greatest impacts we had is that all the professors had to redesign completely their modules, and they revisit totally the pedagogy. Pedagogy was not part of the equation so far. I was kind of expecting a little bit, because we talk a lot about technology, we talk about how to use things, but eventually I like to talk about the human factor. So it's the professor that has to redesign the way she wants the students to learn. And in fact, I think it was the worst summer ever for any professor, zero research, all redesign of programs, and at ESCP, I think we did quite well because we created teams of professors, circles, that were supporting each other. That's really unusual. Professors normally they work in silos and they don't share a lot when it comes to pedagogy, but they share more about the research. Eventually, we got featured by our business publishing. And especially on how to bring back a little bit of the social aspect into the digital learning. So this is how we got impacted, and I think that the students took notice about that, and in fact we didn't witness any drop in recruiting. We're very different from INSEAD because we have a bachelor, master of science, which we call NIM, MBA of executive MBA and executive education, and so we're more spread and also skewed a little bit towards the younger students. The continuous education needed to be totally redesigned here. The usual ingredients were applied. But something that we had to overcome was the prejudice towards any digital way of learning when it comes to executive. Executive don't want to use technology because they had enough of technology. So we implemented a form of try before buying, So try, don't pay for that. And if you're happy, then you pay later. It's a little bit of a little marketing trick. It's been around since ever, but it works. Again, artificial intelligence is there, but I think that education should focus a lot on the human intelligence in an era of artificial intelligence. That's has to adapt a lot. Okay, so very nice what George was proposing, of course, but the key differentiator is how we use those tools. They're all tools, and I think we achieved a lot, and a lot has to be tested and tried. So probably, if I can summarize, is that the pandemic helped us to test many things and to test new pedagogy and to be forced to use new tools, go to flipped classrooms, to you name it. Okay, so we did a lot of testing, and now we're very well prepared. And still, if I may add, is the biggest pain point is exams online. George didn't touch that. If you have a solution for that, I think everybody will be happy, because, wow, it's probably the most difficult part. Probably we should question ourselves, do we still need exams? But that's another chapter. I don't want to bring it over here, and it's a lot of regulation issues, but the next conference.
Great, Francesco. Yeah, I think we can have a few conferences about that, actually. I'll bring that question on to Dillon again. How has business education been impacted by the pandemic?
Thanks, Adam. And I'll actually piggyback off Francesco's last point, because I do. You're right. That is a separate conversation for a separate 3-hour conference, right? Especially the incoming exams, GRE, GMAT. But I do think, going back to this theme of the pandemic serving as a catalyst for change, admissions processes changed in the pandemic. And I think, though many business schools made test optional and said, that's only for this year, I do think there will be carryover. I do think that there will be a reimagining of how we go about in admissions units evaluating prospective students. And like higher ed, I think, admissions offices is a part of higher ed, and it moves slowly, right? We're still using the same processes for evaluating students as we did 20 years ago, right? The GMAT and the GRE and the resume. are there different ways to evaluate students? Are there non-traditional predictors of success? I think this pandemic is going to force admissions units to be more innovative in how they evaluate students. And it started with, these GMAT, GRE exams being put online. Obviously, there were issues, and a lot of business schools were forced to adapt and make the test optional. But that was a big decision that I think opened up a lot of eyes about how we can make the admissions process more holistic and not, so reliant on a couple of data points. The other piece to the other stakeholder that I want to address are employers, because I do think that is where we also see a positive impact as far as how employers went about recruiting our students, both for internships and full-time jobs. And I think when the pandemic first hit, we were terrified about how this would affect the employment rate and the ability of our students to get summer internships. But we were pleasantly surprised to see our placement numbers go up. And we also saw that we had the largest diversity of companies where students were headed, either for their internship or for their full-time job. And mainly that's because employers who, some big bulge bracket banks or big management consulting companies, they have an infrastructure where they go on site to a couple of Wharton and HBS, and they mainly hire out of these, top 3, top 4 institutions. Because they were forced to go virtual, they expanded their reach as far as who they were interviewing for internships and full-time jobs. And that, I think, will also be a positive force going forward. Is companies are reevaluating what types of business schools they can connect with. And again, back to that theme of the catalyst, I think the pandemic is what forced them to reimagine how they should go about recruitment. So I know we've talked a lot about in the classroom, but I do think those are two outside of the classroom effects, admissions and employer recruitment that will have a positive change going forward.
Great, thank you, Dillon. And while you are here, I'll ask you another question. What is the most effective strategy in your experience to attract international students to your business degrees?
Sure. We are a business school at Fordham where I oversee the full-time MBA specifically, but we do have 13 specialized masters, and 80% of the students are international. So we have a lot of tuition revenue coming from outside of the US. And the pandemic forced us to adapt, right? We were a boots on the ground type of institution. We're small. We value those in-person interactions with prospective students, but obviously we were not traveling. So we had to be innovative. And I think one of the main ways or one of the most effective strategies is to really do targeted recruiting based on specific countries and their needs. And I think because we were in a virtual environment, we were able to leverage current students, alums, in ways that we never had before. So if we were going to do a recruiting event in Brazil, we leveraged a couple of our full-time MBA Brazilian students and alums who came from Brazil to join us for that event. And I think that made the quality of that outreach that much more valuable. So I think that, again, that flexibility that comes with the digital space, where you can get people involved, whether they're in California or in Asia, they can hop on a Zoom call and be a part of your recruiting initiatives. That was hugely valuable for us. And also partnering with vendors. I'm going to give a shameless, shout out to Docsity putting on this conference, but we partnered with Docsity because we knew we weren't going to have boots on the ground in Europe and in Latin America, and Docsity has a track record of a lot of students in their system from those areas. So leveraging vendors as well, was something that we found really useful.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dillon. And I'll bring that same question on to Gerard of Hong Kong Baptist University Business School. Gerard, what is the most effective strategy in your experience to attract international students to your business degrees?
I can only speak in the Asian context, which may not be similar to what you're experiencing in your part of the world. Can I just get back to that term, diversity? For us in Hong Kong, mainland Chinese students are not counted as international. And mainland Chinese students are flooding a lot of business schools around the world, and schools can count them as being international. But for us in Hong Kong, we don't count them as being international. We are one country in Hong Kong. So for diversity for us means outside of Greater China. So to get to your question now, what effective strategies do we use? Firstly, research-based to understand at least what the hygiene factors are when students are looking for a business school. According to our research, not just in Hong Kong, but in other Asian countries, we found that there are 3 things they are looking for in a business school. First and foremost is employability. And that's probably of key importance to all students around the world, but especially in Asia, because often the students in Asia are working not just for themselves, but to support their families as well. And the families often expect them to get out pretty quickly after graduation and find a good job. And by the way, in the Asian context, parents are also involved heavily in the decision-making process when Asian students are looking for a business school to study at. So don't ignore parents in the decision-making role when it comes to choosing a business school. So the 3 things that they are looking for are employability first and foremost, then rankings, and then accreditations. When it comes to rankings, if you rank well in a ranking, put it in your promotional material. Of course, if you don't rank very well, you won't promote that. But it doesn't just have to be the QS Global rankings. It could be a regional ranking. It could be a social impact ranking. Any positive ranking data that you have on your school, put it in your promotional material, because that matters certainly in the Asian context. So employability, rankings, and accreditations. So know what the students are looking for. That's my first point. Second point really touches on what Dillon mentioned, and that is leveraging current students and alumni to promote your school. We find that this is the most powerful promotional device that we have, is leveraging our alumni and current students. And again, that's particularly important in the Asian context where it's a more collectivist society. Word of mouth tends to be more powerful in an Asian context. So therefore, utilizing your alumni and friends of your alumni is very useful for promotional programs. So those are the 2 things I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Jared. And I think that's a very good point. For example, when you do webinars, we say never use a professor, in the sense that you don't talk about just the syllabus. You talk about the life in Hong Kong where you are. You talk about from the point of view of a current student, or you talk about you have an alumni and they talk about what they did after graduating. So that's very interesting to hear.
Exactly right, Adam.
Yes. And just, I'll bring you another question now, which is very different, but related to business schools. Has digital recruitment been effective in recruiting international students, and which particular methods have proved the most impactful and productive for you?
Well, I was reflecting on this earlier today, and I don't think we have any offline communication at all. I think we are all online digital communication now. If you look at the mix of digital tools, and this goes back to something that I think George talked about the importance of the website. The website is the most important thing, as you probably know already. The website is the #1 go-to place for any student looking for a business school. And as George said, you'll be surprised how poor the user interface is on some business school websites. So the first thing I would do if I was looking for students would be to do an audit of the school's website, and even get some current students, potential students, to test the website, go through it and see how user-friendly and informative it is. So the first thing is the website. And then a distant second for us, we've found LinkedIn to be quite productive. So we track all of our students who, there's a recruitment funnel, of course, starting off with the application, and then the screening and the interview and the desk rejection, and then finally you get the bums on the seats. We gather that data that Rachel mentioned. We gather that data at every single stage, and we know the profile of students going through each stage. we are using a platform called, I probably shouldn't give a shout out for a platform, but I can tell you, it's called Unibuddy. And this platform basically hooks your current students and alumni up with potential students. And as you say, Adam, they don't want to hear from a professor. At least not much. They want to hear from the horse's mouth, which is current students and alumni.
Yeah, thank you. And I think on the point of websites, even the top schools in the world, every homepage could have 50 links or 100 links. So what we see is very effective in marketing campaigns is to do a landing page just about one course or faculty, whatever, and students go to that page and they fill in their information. They can see all the information just about one course. That's quite effective as well. Rachel, I'm going to bring that question on to you. It's a long one, so I'll repeat it again. Has digital recruitment been effective in recruiting international students, and which particular methods have proved most impactful and productive for you?
I think I will obviously build on what's already been said, but I think maybe 2 or 3 points that I could add. We've really built with our faculty, so we don't have them so much involved in kind of giving information about the program or feedback. This is mainly through students and alumni, and then staff. I have to say, admissions spotlight sessions are always very popular. People want to know how to prepare their application in the best way. So very tailored sessions work well, but we found also that master classes work really, really well. And this for us has been a great tool to be able to target all of our pipeline, whether it is for MBA. We now have a MIM that just launched, so this is the younger generation, and then executive MBA and executive masters. So this has been really great for us to bring in faculty for 1-hour sessions. And what we've experimented with times, and we found that late Singapore is a great time. So 8 p.m. Singapore, 9 p.m. To capture a lot of the world. And we find that we get people from all over the world that are connecting. So the US are getting up early, but they're getting up early. We even get California. So this has been really popular. We generally have about 1,000 people that connect to these events. So it's really well worth the faculty's time, and we find that we get a good spread across all of the different segments. So we found that to be really effective. We used to do masterclasses all over the world, generally get between 50 and 100 people depending on the destination. So we found that that's been brilliant, and we're not going to go back to physical masterclasses. We're going to keep them online. So that's been really, really important in our strategy. And then I think others have been kind of really tailored campaigns in terms of awareness. We've done a big campaign around women called Limitless. If you want to have a look, it's on our website. We have a content area called In the Know that's run by marketing and recruitment. And this campaign has really kind of focused on 18 alumni from INSEAD, female alumni from all over the world, very different backgrounds, to showcase the possibilities and opportunities that women have and the different paths that they've taken. So we find also that very tailored campaigns focusing on areas that we've wanted to develop, such as gender diversity, have been really successful. So I think those are my main comments. And then I think in general, to really think about your customer journey. So and we really think about trying to build a customer journey from a first touch point to when people actually submit the application, and thinking of that in terms of information that they need, and then inspire, what I call inspirational content. I don't know whether it's a real term, but it's what I use with my team. So how to, all of the things that could inspire them to actually look at your institution, such as faculty content, alumni, what's happening on campus, and a mix of kind of real-time and evergreen content, so that they can get a glimpse into what's happening today, and then they can have also a look into the really impactful projects or initiatives of the university that you maybe produce kind of more sophisticated content around. So.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I'll ask you another question, if that's okay. So my other question is, are international hubs / campuses more effective and money saving for business degrees than trying to bring students to campus?
So I have a relatively short answer. I'm sure that Francesco also has comments on this, being a multi-campus, very well-established business school as well. I think if you are going to have the multi, I suppose, international hubs or campuses, I would say if it's going to be really effective, they need to actually be proper campuses. You need to invest in them and they need to have a life of their own. I think this is much more effective than just having hubs which are kind of empty shells. I think if you're going to have the empty shell, you may as well have a partner. But one of the big advantages, I think, of having campuses around the world is that you can really manage the student mobility very well. You can manage the quality of teaching across the program, and this is something that we see as a huge benefit of having campuses in different areas of the world and exposing our students to the experience of mobility, but being able to really ensure the quality of that experience and that our students get what they're looking for in terms of course content and interactions.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. And our final question then is for Francesco. Francesco, what is attractive in a business degree for international students given the limitations of the job market in destinations such as the USA?
Yeah, of course, I will build a little bit from Rachel. And of course, as Rachel said, you having international campuses, we have campuses only in Europe, but we're pretty much present in all the major country news. So since we are in Paris, London, Berlin, Madrid, Turin, and also Warsaw, thanks to a very strong partnership. So the point is what you learn from the experience of living and for a sizable amount of time in a different country. That what makes the difference. When I said before that you learn more from your peers than what you learn from the structural classroom, of course, are needed. Okay, but what you learn is what you learn from the confrontation you have with your peers. In the model of multi-campus, you tend to change the classroom where you are every other semester. So you have a constant confrontation with different students, with different peers, and normally they're very international, they're very diverse, and this is the word. So with the pandemic, we learned that the word is more than flat. It's flat, is small, in in a blink of an eye, all the world got the COVID. That's why we need to have international education. You need to be exposed to an international education, regardless of the job opportunity that today are kind of going a little bit down in the US. Well, any job is an international job. You cannot wake up in the morning and thinking of just selling your goods, your eggs to your neighbor. You sell everywhere. We see it with all the artisan here that we have in the small artisan that we have here in Italy. The one that survived the COVID were the one that went online. They used the digital means, and at the same time they were able to internationalize. So international doesn't mean that you have to move to the US. It means doing business at a very large scale. And the best way to do business is to have something in common with the person you have on the other side of Zoom or whatever. And you can only learn, to create a common ground if you live and experience different cultures, different places. So I think this is fundamental. Probably in the future we will have different campuses that will be different. We touched here and there, many of my colleagues touch here and there how the campuses in the future will be. There will be more focus on social activity and bringing people together. But there will be more physical experience probably than and real physical interaction than we have now, complemented by online learning. This is exactly because to go international, you need to learn the culture before the language.
Okay, Francesco, very good point to end on. Thank you very much. Folks, as I mentioned earlier, we have a Q&A session coming up. It's going to be very short. We did receive one question earlier, which was, what do you think of cooperating with recruitment agents for business schools?
Can I give my 2 cents? I guess I'll start. Maybe that will get the conversation going. I don't think it makes a difference if you're a business school or if you're the rest of the university, if you're independent or within a large organization. Recruitment agents are companies that are helping universities around the world get the students that are interested and are able to go to your university. So while I understand that there's hesitation when it comes to recruitment agents, when there's you get to pay them commission fees and so on and so forth. Yes, if you think from a business perspective, they become part of that enlarged recruitment portfolio that will help you bring the students to your campus. They are your eyes and ears, your foot and boots on the ground. They provide a service that in many cases nobody else is able to provide. I mean, you won't be able to get as much impact if you go to 2 fairs, even face to face, not to talk about only virtual, in India or in China. These groups, these organizations will be your best advocates. And they will do that because, of course, on one hand, they're co-interested in that fee, in that commission fee, and there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. But also because they want their reputation and their brand in their local market to grow. Oh, they were able to place students at Fordham or at a big university. So be it. That's great. So that there's a mutual back and forth benefit there, I believe. So. Is there a problem with it? No, I don't think so. I think that that building a solid portfolio of recruitment agencies all over the world or in the markets where you are mostly interested in attracting students from is a great tool in your recruitment portfolio. I'm saying this as a professional enrollment professional, international enrollment professional with many years of experience. I've always built portfolios of agents and engage them as colleagues, as partners, working directly with them, providing the information that I needed to provide for them so that they can be successful and I can get the students.
Thank you, George. And would any of the speakers like to take that as well?
I would just echo those sentiments. I think, especially if you are an institution that's not a household name outside of the location where your campus resides, and you're an institution that wants to build that top of the funnel, leveraging vendors and agents can be extremely valuable. And for us, that's one thing we reevaluate every year is how can we attract quality leads and more quality leads at that top of the funnel. And you can't do it with just the use of your internal CRM and boots on the ground, right? No admissions office has those types of resources. Or if there are admissions offices with those types of resources, I'd love to work for them. But the reality is you need to leverage some of these outside organizations. So I see it as a valuable tool.
Okay, brilliant, Dillon. Well, guys, it's an hour and a half now. So I think we can finish now. But I just want to say thank you to everyone, all the speakers who volunteered to come today, everyone who came and gave their time for an hour and a half as well. Thanks very much.